I'm James, founder of MegaCat Studios and chief wrestling officer.
I'm Zach, the head of narrative at MegaCat Studios.
This is a delight to have as part of Shacknews' E6 content. Twice you recommended gaming E's for the month of June. We have a lot of wrestling fans on staff at Shack News. I grew up watching Hulk Hogan, Macho Man, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, Ric Flair, all that stuff. I have a lot of colleagues on staff that are the same. They still follow it today. They still follow WWE and AEW. And seeing this, like, every one of us is like, how has this never happened before? How is a wrestling RPG in which you take that glamour and pageantry and apply, like, RPG level up skills and progression? How has that never happened before?
I'm with you there. You know, Zach and I think we've been working on WrestleQuest for coming up on 4 years. Is that right, Zach?
Yeah.
All different levels and scales of like staffing. You know, early days was just like one or two people, but you know, when we first started WrestleQuest, it was one of our like key MegaCat goal projects, but it's such a big undertaking to make like a big, rich RPG that serves RPGs and also serves these like notable, you know, characters and legends. So it's been a massive undertaking. And you know, what's funny, I was just chatting with Johnny about this prior to the interview, Zach, is that you know, we've had so many publishers like say like no because they didn't think there was a fit between wrestling and RPG players, and it was a, you know, bad intersection, didn't make sense. You know, wrestling was a little too blue collar and RPGs a more sophisticated genre, and tons of this type of feedback for about 2 years. And then we shared it with Skybound, and they have a massive number of wrestling fans on their staff and just tons of like core, I want to say like gaming folks to kind of share some of our sensibilities. So they gave it a quick green light, and then we were, you know, off to the races, kind of speeding up WrestleQuest development.
Yeah, and Johnny, you're 100% right when you say why hasn't this been done before? Because really, at the heart of RPGs and wrestling is story. I mean, it's all about these larger than life characters and these. We always say it's not just about the action in the ring. It's about what happens on the mic, behind the scenes, the dramatic reveals, the betrayals, the team ups. All that stuff is, you know, is the lifeblood of both of these things.
And, like, I have to wonder about the licensing, too, because you're not just building a RPG, you're actually including wrestling legends in it. Like, we've already got confirmation of Jake the Snake, Macho Man, Andre the Giant, and did I hear DDP? Did I hear DDP was in as well? And like, what can you talk a little bit about the process of like getting that licensing together?
Yeah, I think Zach and I will both have like something fun to contribute there. But you know, for us, it was really finding out that wrestling is just also incredibly like tribal, and there's very much like a brothers in arms, like backstage vetting situation. So once we had gotten through communicating our vision for WrestleQuest to the first few folks and got them really excited and embracing the project, everybody actually started coming to us because they wanted to be part of and involved with WrestleQuest. So it's been awesome on that side, specifically with the talent. But on the I guess I want to call it like private conflict verification side, to make sure that there's no other agreements in conflict and that there's no issues with folks like WWE. You know, it's taken a whole lot of effort and planning and just legal time and hours just to make sure that we're doing everything not only in a way that's great for the fans, but is completely out of any conflict with other WWE products, since it's not affiliated at all with the WWE. But it's been a huge undertaking for sure. It's continued to be something we're very respectful of. You know, like truly none of this happens without the WWE, right? Like all these, WWE basically took all the best territory talent and put them under this one roof, and you know, scaled that industry and that business to, you know, multiple magnitudes above where it was. And that's the era we all grew up with and we were fans of. So it's kind of interesting to work outside of WWE's rights, and specifically with the talent, and trying to be, you know, as utmost respect to WWE side of it, while also really digging into some of the autobiographical sides of what makes these wrestling legends great. And to our benefit, many of the people in the game, if not all of them, have a massively successful history prior to WWE and then after WWE. So there's really a lot to work with there for the people that we were able to get engaged with.
Yeah, and speaking about them being, sort of our heroes that we grew up with, we present them the same way in the game, where all the talent that we have are, they appear literally on a pedestal as these larger-than-life Statue of Liberty-esque statues they're like shrines or monuments that, in the game world, people come from all over to kind of pay respect and pay tribute to.
And like, looking at this game, first off, the art style is so fun. Like, I really appreciate how it's got like that. It still goes for like that old school like SNES vibe of RPG, but like, you got these these muscly little dudes just beating the hell out of each other in the ring. How did the art style and how did the visuals come together in this game? Like, what inspired you, and how did it develop over time?
Zach, I know you're going to want to celebrate some of this since it's so much of your life the last few years. But, one of the things that came out of our first kind of creative session was that in many cases, it was actually the toys and the video games that introduced us to wrestling when we were kids. Like, my first wrestling memories were receiving like a Ric Flair and a Hulk Hogan action figure, and then playing like WrestleQuest at an arcade. I did those two activities as a wrestling fan prior to watching my first wrestling match, and I think that many of us like remember more of the WrestleMania, the arcade game, or Super WrestleMania on Raw than we actually do wrestling events in some cases until we get older, that is. So we decided that one of the unique visual identities we wanted for WrestleQuest was to make everything in this action figure likeness. It also kind of taps into this really exciting, like, creative world of being, doubling down on nostalgia of like being a child and having these fantasy matches and having these like, from a fan standpoint, what really brings us together both with the talent and with folks who we're chatting with about WrestleQuest and at trade shows and the team is that we're all wrestling fans first, and kind of creating that sense of, I want to say, like, fantasy excitement of, not just wrestler versus wrestler, but maybe it's wrestler versus Army Man. Maybe it's wrestler versus this, plush bunny because you don't actually have a Goldberg doll, and maybe it's because you don't like Goldberg, but maybe Goldberg becomes a teddy bear and you just rip his stuffing out.
And hand in hand with the idea of it, having this pixel art style, is that we're obviously evoking, this classic era of wrestling, the 80s and 90s, and we also do the same thing with, the video games from that time. There's a lot of inspiration and influence we took from, these classic JRPGs from the Super Nintendo era. And we use that as sort of our jumping off point for, the overall design of the game. And we took what's great about those classic RPGs and just, wrestleified them to make them all unique and interesting and fresh. So if we say that if you're a wrestling fan, there's something here for you. If you're an RPG fan but don't care about wrestling, guess what? There's still something here for you.
I like that phrase.
I'm sorry
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I don't know if you can see my assistant here is actually playing with like a stuffed steel chair toy. They're just very committed at this point. Like even the dogs are engaged.
Nice. And like, I like that word wrestleified because like looking at the gameplay that we've seen in the screenshots, like there are a lot of things that are very, very specific to the wrestling world that you've sort of adapted into various RPG mechanics here. Like, I see the hype meter, there's the abilities, there's the in-ring and out-of-ring stuff, and like, I just want to know, like, and there's even the alignment meter with heel and face, which I love that. And I just want to know, like, did y'all just, like, from the get-go have an idea of how you wanted to sort of JRP or just like RPG up various wrestling facets, or did it sort of come together and did you discover these parallels as you went?
Well, our goal from the get-go was to take that classic turn-based JRPG formula and then make it more engaging and interesting. I grew up on that system and I love it, but after a while it becomes very tedious where you can just get into battle and just hit the attack button and play an autopilot, basically. We wanted to kind of move away from that, and wrestlefying it was really the way to do it. Like the hype meter is an indication of the audience's interest in the fight. Every fight, there's a live audience that watches. So if you come in and, again, if you just spam that attack button, they'll start to get bored, the hype meter will drain out, and your enemies will start to get more powerful. But instead, if you approach it with more showmanship and creativity, you're able to raise the hype meter. And when that happens, your guys get more powerful, and you'll even get more experience. And if you can get high enough, you can get better loot after the battle. And from there, it just, kind of flowed into all these other systems, like knocking enemies off the ropes, and they come back for a follow-up attack. Things like tag team maneuvers, and during boss battles, there's a system called dramatic moments, and these are supposed to be the kind of scripted ebb and flow of a match of what's supposed to happen. And there are these optional criteria, which are sometimes pretty challenging to mark off, to obtain. But if you're able to do it, you get rewarded with special boss loot after the battle. So the WrestleQuest doesn't just happen in the combat either. We really try to take all the JRPG tropes and WrestleFi them. So you're not going to find, the hidden princesses and things like that here. It's more about, pile drivers and power bombs, and you're more likely to find a dirty heel manager than you are a hidden princess in WrestleQuest. So it's definitely a unique RPG world. It's not just another medieval fantasy type setting. It's definitely has its own flavor. And again, the WrestleQuest is everywhere. Instead of locked doors and keys, you'll find tables that block your path, and to get through them, you have to find an NPC to kind of slam through it to open up. So it's really, again, everything's been WrestleFied.
Yeah, and speaking along that line of heel versus face, is there gonna be branching paths in this game? Are we gonna see different aspects of it depending on how we play our wrestler?
So it is a JRPG at its core, so the story is linear. That being said, there's plenty of side content. There's a ton of side quests. And the heel and face system, the karma system, there are many opportunities where you can, do a decision that influences that in some way. And that'll affect your characters as far as the abilities they can use and the equipment they can wear. So some equipment is, only for heels, some is only for faces. And then every unit has passive abilities that are based on your, heel-face alignment.
And I have to ask, as you've gotten real wrestlers to collaborate with you on this, and as you've researched and WrestleFied various aspects, are there any things either behind the curtain on game design or behind the curtain on wrestling that you've learned as you've been building this game?
I want to say we've always been wrestling fans, but we just came out of Wrestle University. It's in many cases you get to know some of the talent as you're going through some of the creative and sign-off process, and they can't help but just start keying you into really wild things from their perspective. I'd say some of my favorite things that didn't make it into the game are things like wrestlers suggesting certain Motel 6s to be included because of how famous they are for certain events, and I just from a wrestling fan, it's been so much fun, bringing this game to life. As a game designing game company, it's been a massive undertaking since it's also, just a really deep and long and wide game. There's 12 playable characters, 500 NPCs. It's a huge project for us. It's a front-room activity for multiple years. It's just so fulfilling to see the reception and see everyone love it, and getting fan mail to a game that hasn't been submitted as a demo has been a pretty fun change, I guess, for some of our community manager. At first, there are just so many diehard wrestling fans everywhere, and so many RPG fans that are just, giving us these day one messages.
And working with the real talent, we also wanted to showcase what they do as far as what they put into wrestling to make it work. There's the amount of blood, sweat, and tears they put into their careers is astonishing. So in our stories and in our characters, we wanted to showcase not only the idea of these characters wanting to be a champion, but also the kind of, like you mentioned, behind the scenes type stuff, what do you sacrifice to become a champion? So some of the characters explore, being away from your family for long periods of time, and the stress that puts on, yourself and also your marriage and things like that. So we kind of show both sides, the pomp and circumstances in the ring, and then also everything that happens outside of it.
With how many fans there are out there that have seen this game, and now they're super excited and they want to see more, have you had any as you've seen suggestions and all that come in from both fans and the performers that you're collaborating with. Have you like put a limit on your scope at all as to what you want it to do or what you can do, or have you just been kind of like, if there's something cool, have you been like, yeah, let's figure out how to do that?
So James has a new hobby. It's collecting wrestlers, and it's really hard to stop that guy.
Yeah, it's all the caffeine, but it's like it's so hard to say no whenever you see these like amazing moments creep up out of nowhere. For that matter, every time we set up at any type of event or demo, digital or physical, we just get showered with people that have wish list items, and some of them make it in, and some end up kind of tabled on the roadmap. At this point, we're out of talent space by far. We have a really exciting roster of wrestlers we can't wait to start leaking and announcing to everybody, and we're already kind of in the works and planning out like what we're gonna have for DLC and WrestleQuest 2. So it's something we're very committed to. We kind of see it as part of the Big Cat past, present, and future. So it's the ever incoming fire hose of wrestling ideas is something that we welcome.
I love the idea of a WrestleQuest universe. I really do hope this game does well, because I would love to see more and more and more. But at the same time, I am curious, like, as fans, you have to have seen your share of matches. You have to have seen your share of history. And I want to ask, like, is there any particular match or moment in wrestling history that stands out in your mind that you're like, I got to figure out how to put that into this game somehow?
Most of the matches themselves, like, we can't, they would not be assets that are usable for us. They'd be WWE property. So, like, things that are autobiographical, that are part of someone's, like, character, that influence those matches or are part of that core story are really where WrestleQuest lives. But there's packed throughout the game. There are literally hundreds of Easter eggs that play homage to these moments and these memories. So it's certainly something that's top of mind. But it's part of the creative exercise is how do we communicate this without being so on the nose that it's just taking this other crafted WWE storyline. And I think that's actually one of the things that makes WrestleQuest a lot of fun for wrestling fans when they play through.
And the good thing about wrestling is that, even though we can't copy exact matches and things like that, wrestling is so deep as far as, its influence on pop culture and just the things about it that are recognizable, that it's easy to, pull ideas and kind of trends or themes and put those into the game. And
I kind of love how much, like, you can mess with your particular character. Or am I seeing that correctly? You can deck your character out in various different outfits. Is that right?
There's some interesting crafting systems. It's not outfits, but it's you can definitely equip a lot of cool pieces that make your character unique. But it's mostly in how they can be used, and not like not quite like a character customization tool, which is something we would have loved to have in the roadmap. But once we got deeper and more playable characters and more content and more moves, and maybe Zach can speak to that, but the number of moves are really what prevented us making like character customization. Like, there's literally thousands of unique frames in WrestleQuest for just the movesets. For the playable characters, that would be its own separate game undertaking.
Yeah, there's so many, individual abilities as well as tag team maneuvers, between two units or even triple tag teams, that it's really a bear in the amount of art that's there for it. That being said, we do offer a lot of kind of customization and player agency as far as mechanics and strategy go. Getting back to that hype meter, that meter that fills up during combat, there's a system called hype types. And you can assign any of these to any of your characters, and that determines how they generate that hype. So, and these are based after wrestling archetypes. So there's, the powerhouse. If you have a powerhouse hype type assigned to a character, they'll generate hype whenever they attack or, defeat an enemy. There's the technician hype type, which is more about applying debuffs or nailing button presses, things like that. So you have options as far as how you approach combat and your overall strategy to pump up that hype meter, because it is so pivotal to winning matches. Then beyond that, there's the manager system, which is basically a fourth player character that they don't appear in combat and you don't have direct control over them, They provide passive bonuses and can maybe be used to kind of fill in your skill gaps. So if you have a party of 3 heavy hitters, but they don't have any healing, you can use a manager in your party that offers healing abilities to some of them. Or you can double down and just, use a manager that makes your guys even stronger. So again, it gets back to how you want to play and what your overall strategy with combat and entertaining the audience is.
And with this game being a JRPG as it is, like, you have the task of assigning numbers to a lot of moves. Like, what does a pile driver do? What does a splash do? Like, how much damage? How many points? And like, can you talk a bit about like the process of applying those stats to all of these things in the wrestling universe, and like the task of balancing it out and making sure everything is challenging but fun?
Can I just jump in, Zach, and say this is why we had to get insurance for some of our core team members? Because of all like I think it's called like method development and method writing that Zach's been doing.
Yeah. For the past 40 years, I've been a method writer. Power bombing my kids to sleep every day and out driving the team members. Just to see what hurts the most, really. But it's been fun to kind of look at things that are for pro wrestling and a power bomb and how much damage did that do? Is that twice as powerful? Especially because wrestling is not real, kayfabe. But putting that into game terms, has been definitely fun and also a challenge. And balancing is interesting because we want to create the right sense of challenge and the right sense of kind of ebb and flow of where you are as far as like fighting versus being in the story and whatnot. But we've also been very conscious of maybe first-time RPG players or casual players. We don't want to alienate them with all these systems that are, take the RPG formula and then kind of pump it up a couple notches. So to kind of allow for that, we have a system we're calling mid-card mode, which allows people to steamroll their way through combat. And, you'll do extra damage. You can defeat enemies quickly. It disables the pinning mechanics. So right now, whenever you defeat a wrestler in battle, if you bring them down to 0 HP, they don't die outright. You have to pin them before they're down and out. And if you fail that pin, they can get up, they'll kick out and come back with HP restored. Mid-card mode, we've disabled that, again, to allow for these players that may not, maybe they're not interested in doing all the cool wrestling stuff. Maybe they just want to see the cool wrestling story, or maybe they don't want to, worry about combat so much. So it's been a mix of, again, providing that challenge, but also making the game accessible to everyone.
I think every wrestling fan that has been watching for years knows, like, nobody stays on top forever. So like, I imagine like you get to the top, you get the championship belt, but like no one keeps the belt forever. And does like stuff like that apply, like come into the story at all? Like where like nobody is just the eternal champion. That's why Ric Flair has like 20 different championship belts. And does that ebb and flow of being on top, being the king, being knocked off, does that play into the story of WrestleQuest?
Oh, yeah. So again, with a cast of 12 playable characters, everyone kind of gets their time in the spotlight, but there's 2 primary protagonists, and all the other characters are kind of orbit around them. But there's very much this idea of central to the game is this idea of being a champion or being a hero. And on what terms? Machacho Man exists in constant kayfabe. He thinks pro wrestling is real, and he can't see past that, no matter how many times someone tells him it's fake or it's scripted. So his arc is really about becoming the best, becoming a champion like he's always seen, being one of his heroes, becoming one of his heroes that he's grown up with. And can he do that on his own terms? Can he do that without like losing his soul, essentially? The other one, Brink Logan, is very much aware of the ins and outs of the business. He's sort of this mid-card jobber in his father's promotion. The thing is that he's been trained in wrestling his whole life, so he's very technically sound. He's an excellent wrestler. So he knows that, in a shoot, he'd beat any of them. So he also wants to become a champion, but it's kind of, how can he do that while supporting his father? How can he kind of break out of the rut he's in without damaging his family and things like that?
Nice. And where can people find out more about WrestleQuest? Like, what's next for the game?
It's a good question. So we're kind of beholden to like our publisher's roadmap as far as like when and how things are like brought into the public eye. But we're really excited for this coming month because I know there's some big announcements coming up. We have something actually coming up in LA shortly, and next month, as far as I see today, it looks like we're going to be kind of steamrolling that one with another. So we're hoping to have, I guess I want to call it like a pretty firm beta completing the game the next like 60 days, and from that point we're just going to reevaluate some of the content opportunities we have and wrestlers and see how do we which we want to put into our DLC post-launch content, since we literally have depending on your play style, like a 30 to 50 hour core game. It's a lot of content already. I don't think we're short on content, so I think at this point we have to take some of our exciting wrestling fan additions and start post-launch planning, which we're really excited by because it's been a 4-year labor of love, and that'll probably inform all the other beats in between.
And there is a demo out for this now as well. Like, people can go and they can see what it's about. They can get a taste of the action and see get basically a peek at what's going to be going on.
Yeah, we can't wait for people to check it out. It's like it's going to be prettier when it gets launched, but you can really get a good sense for what WrestleQuest has to offer in the demo from a mechanic standpoint on Steam.
And where can people follow the game and get the latest news on what's going on with it?
So MegaCat Studios on all social. Discord, we're just MegaCat. So discord.gg/MegaCat. We're pretty wrestling dedicated at this point, so feel free to share your wrestling thoughts, good and bad. I don't mind being a face or a heel. If you want to play off of one another, I'm ready to go. And then in general, if anybody wants to learn more about WrestleQuest, specifically the WrestleQuest.com website also has its own dedicated newsletter. Zach, any wrestle advice or sage wrestle wisdom? Any turnbuckle tales?
Stay sweaty.
It's perfect.